Welcome to the Hernia Gods Podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy, position, or opinions of Orlando Health or any of our employers. And now, without further ado, let's talk hernias. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hernia Gods Podcast. This is your mere mortal host, Luke Elms, and today I am joined by Mike Rosen. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, sometimes we have episodes where we try to put a spotlight on surgeons that nobody knows. And so hopefully this is your chance to get your name out there to where the public knows who you are.
If I can go back to nobody knows me, I'd happily go there. I want to kick us off by saying, Luke, I'm a mere mortal too. And you should never forget, we're all mortals.
Exactly. That's the point. Despite what some people say in the comments, I'm not just a raging narcissist. Quite the opposite.
I might get some of those comments too. So you got to be able to brush that stuff off.
Yeah. Well, as we start every episode, I wanted to just give you a chance to tell us, who you are, how you got where you are, and where you come from.
Sure. So. Well, listen, I think probably who I am, you have to start from the beginning to understand Mike Rosen. And so I would say who I am at my core is a middle child. So I'm a middle child, and I grew up in Atlanta. My dad was a general surgeon. He's a private practice general surgeon, solo private practice general surgeon. I kind of always thought he worked too hard, and I would never want to be a general surgeon. So I went off to college in Vanderbilt to be a lawyer. And then I found out that I hated to write, which is interesting because that's a fair amount of what I do right now. But I hated it. I didn't like it. And I kind of drifted over a little bit more to the sciences. And I thought I wanted to be, which was kind of my dream job, was to be a biologist and be a high school biology teacher and a high school basketball coach, which was kind of my plan. And throughout college, to kind of do that, I traveled most of the time to Baja and the southwest of the U.S. And I was in a place called Bahia de Los Angeles, if you guys have ever heard of that. If you look at the Baja coast, it's halfway down the Baja coast on the Sierra Cortez side. I mean, it's in the absolute middle of nowhere. And we used to go out on the islands and we studied the migration patterns of black widow spiders and scorpions.
Whoa.
And it sounds pretty cool. And it actually it helped formulate my idea of science. But what we basically did was in Baja, there's these cactus on the mainland and then cactus on these islands that could be like 50 feet offshore to 15 miles offshore. And a cactus on the mainland would have one black widow spider and one scorpion, and then a cactus on one of the islands would have 50 black widow spiders and 100 scorpions. And so our job was to study. We would go out and collect them. We would kind of bring them back to the lab. We would understand the genetics and where they came from and why they migrated that way. And so it was beautiful. I spent all my summers out there. We would get on boats. We would fish. We would camp on the islands. It was absolutely incredible. And so I always tell the story when I give grand rounds is that, so I asked my professor, kind of towards the end of my time, I'm like, hey, Dr. Paulus, like, when do we get the answer? Like when do we know that we figured out the migration patterns? And he was like, Mike, you idiot. We'll never find that out because if we figure that out, we can't come back here. So that taught me about good science, ask more questions than it answers, and so anyway, so I finished all that, and then kind of towards the end of my time, I decided I wanted to go to medical school. I kind of volunteered in the emergency room, and I really thought it was exciting, and I'm like, it's the funniest thing ever because if you made me work in the emergency room right now, I'd probably quit. So anyways, then I decided to go to medical school, but I had this offer to go with my professor to Africa to study in the Gobi Desert, the same thing, the migration patterns of the black widow spiders and scorpions. And so I had that. So I actually got to defer medical school for a year. So I actually got in, and they let me defer it. I encourage all young people, take a year off for medical school. My daughter's a fourth-year medical student right now. She's about to graduate. She took a year off. I think take a year off if you can do it, and don't work in somebody's stupid lab or do ridiculous medical things. Go off and see the world and become a kind of an interesting person and learn what's out there. So I travel. I went with a buddy of mine because it was like a 3-month block where I was going to be able to do that. And I went with a buddy of mine, and we went through South Pacific, New Zealand, Australia, traveled all over the place. And then he left. I went to Africa, and I spent 3 months in this this place called Namibia. It was called Southwest Africa at the time because it was part of South Africa. And I was there. This was maybe like November, December-ish in 1992. And after I finished that, I took 3 months, and I had a truck that I drove all throughout Southern Africa by myself, which is like kind of hard to imagine nowadays. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have anything. And I drove, and I was actually just randomly in Cape Town, South Africa, in a shanty town by myself the day that apartheid ended, which was like this magical thing that just completely randomly, it's the only place I've ever been in my life where nobody knew my accent because Americans just did not go there. So that was pretty spectacular. I was in Cape Town. I went to Zimbabwe. I did all that stuff. And then I came back and I had 6 months off. So I moved to Vail, Colorado with a fraternity brother of mine, and I actually slept under his kitchen in East Vail in his condo. And maybe my second week out there, I met who is my wife now for 30 years. She was a ski instructor in Vail. I did not know how to ski, and she taught me how to ski, which was hard for me. But that's my skiing story. Then I went off to medical school at University of Southern California, and I went there initially wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, but at the time there, at least, I probably would have loved being an orthopedic surgeon too, but at the time I went into the trauma group was just incredible. And when you look at some of the people who came out of there at that time, it was really unreal. It was just awesome group of people. We would be up all night operating, then we would go play basketball the next day together and kill each other. And it was just such a great kind of vibe and a group to be with. So I thought, all right, I want to be a general surgeon. So then I did my training at Mass General, which was a great experience. And I think probably has a reputation that it's not really accurate. It was really great people, great teachers, just an incredible group cohort that I went through with, and when I think about how successful they are right now. But really, it was just an awesome experience. I would say my wife did not love it. This was pre-80-hour work week, which is we work 120 hours. I mean, it was busy, and then I went. And so this was kind of transformative for me. I went and spent. I was going to go in the lab. I was going to actually work in David Ratner's lab, and he happened to be the visiting professor at Cleveland Clinic the weekend before I was going to do it on Monday, signed the deal with him. And he came back, and I mean, truthfully, a lot of my success in my life is the people I've worked with and my mentors, and at times being stupid and not listening to them, but at lucky moments being smart enough to listen to the advice and take that advice, which is sometimes hard. But anyways, he came back. He's like, Mike, you got to go to Cleveland. They got so much great stuff going on. It's incredible. So I was like, So actually, my dad, who's a general surgeon, trained at Case Western. Mm-hmm. And this was back in the 70s, and absolutely hated it there. It was Cleveland's the worst place. The lake caught on fire. It was terrible. and so I was like, I'm not going to Cleveland. Forget it. And he's like, well, you got to think about it. And my wife she went to Ohio State, and she's from Chicago, actually, where I am now. And so she was like, we should go check it out. We were, I think she was pregnant with my first child at that time, so we knew we kind of wanted to be closer to home. So I was like, all right, I'll go out there. And so I met Jeff Posky, who's probably one of the most influential people. And if we tell stories today, as I'm sure we will, he's probably the most responsible for like my career and just really incredible mentorship on family, academics, surgery life, like everything. I mean, to me, that's what really makes people is your mentor. So I worked with him for 2 years and just kind of was like blown away about the minimally invasive stuff. It was like a magical moment in Cleveland. They had all this resources, all this money, and I just like really got excited by it, and then came back, finished my residency, and then I did my fellowship with Todd Henneford, which was another like transformative moment for me. And again, I would say for every young surgeon out there, you know, there's probably like 3 people you hear in your ear while you're operating as a attending. Young, old, doesn't matter. And you know, like I hear Todd's voice in my ear. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night sweating, hysterical, and having an anxiety attack because of Todd. It took me like 10 years to get over that. But he, I mean, truly to his credit, like I think he, number one, I mean, on a personal level, he taught me how to be a better surgeon, as well as Ken Kircher, his partner. Like I kind of graduated my residency definitely thinking I was the man. I mean, there's no question about it. And then I went out there and I realized like, wow, there's another level to this stuff. And those guys were just unbelievable surgeons, unbelievable doctors, clinicians, like took care of patients, cared, like wanted to be great. So he was transformative. And I would say, I mean, on this podcast, we really think about like, when I think about like leaders and leadership and things like that, I think the only real way to measure that is like, look at their wake and like what comes behind them. And I think Todd is, I mean, it's unbelievable. He has created this field. And so funny enough, I finished my fellowship there. And the last thing I said was, this is the last damn hernia I will ever fix. and that's actually, I like to tell that story because like, I think it's so key that people don't know what they're really going to do. So when I went there, because I wanted to learn minimally invasive surgery because 20 whatever years ago or so, my goal for myself was to be a laparoscopic liver surgeon. And I had that goal because I had done a lot of hepatobiliary surgery in my residency, and I was really comfortable with that. And there was no minimally invasive liver surgeons at the time. I mean, really, it was a field that didn't exist. So I knew how to do all the open stuff from residency, and I wanted to go learn all the laparoscopic kind of skills from Todd. And we did I mean, the laparoscopic stuff there was unbelievable. But when I came back, so what happened was Jeff Ponsky started as the chair at University Hospitals in Case. And I was his first recruit, and I kind of went there because I wanted to watch somebody build a department and learn how to lead and do all that stuff. So I mean, that kind of moment in time for me was absolutely transformative. Just watching him, kind of going through your own like young surgeon struggles of being an idiot, like, you know, being insecure and not being an adult and not understanding the bigger picture, like all that stupid stuff that many people kind of falter with. I went through a factor of 10, and I'll just tell you a funny story real quick. So I remember I went to Jeff and I was really pissed that one of my partners was sending the adrenals to somebody else. And I was like, I mean, what the heck? Like, they're sending to another division. Like, I've done more adrenals than anybody. Like, I just finished this fellowship. Like, come on. Like, why am I not getting adrenals? He's like, okay, I hear you. He's like, so I just want to know what number of adrenals does it take to make Mike Rosen happy and get out of my office? Like, if this is your only goal in life, you tell me, is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 9? I'll make sure you get those. And I don't want to hear back from you. Because if that's your goal, we're going to achieve that one goal and you be quiet. And I was like, all right, like, whatever. I'm an idiot. I understand. Yeah. I'll move on with my life. So it's like, that's the kind of mentoring I need. It's like, when it's 4th and 1 and you're your own 5-yard line, you must punt. So anyways, I went, I spent like 9 or 10 years there, and then we all moved to Cleveland Clinic. And that's how these kind of places work, is they go every 10 years, everybody switches and gets pissed off at the administration. And then I spent 10 years at Cleveland Clinic, kind of built up a great team, great people, kind of accomplished all my goals. Really kind of transition. That was kind of my transition away from kind of focusing on like me and really thinking more about the team and the people and everything, which has been probably the most rewarding part. And then I kind of accomplished everything there, and now I'm at Northwestern, and I've been here about like 15 months, and it's been wonderful. Chicago's unbelievable. All my kids are out of the house. It's my wife and I. My daughter lives right down the street. My wife, I said, is from Chicago, and so here I am.
Yeah.
Still fixing hernias. I do a little more bread and butter stuff, but still got the kind of disaster stuff. And building up a division of GI surgery, which has been kind of really rewarding and exciting, and just work with an awesome team. So that's a long-winded answer.
Oh no, that's exactly the answer we want on this podcast. So feel free to keep it up. It's so funny. I'll be a little behind the scenes. I actually don't prepare very much at all for these because I don't want to come in with like a preconceived bias about where to drive the conversation or anything. So a lot of stuff that you were talking about, I knew a little bit about it. But for instance, one of the things I did know is that you did scorpion research. You can thank Charlotte for that. But you talk about wanting to grow up when you were young and wanting to be a high school basketball coach and a biology teacher. That's exactly what I thought I was going to be.
That's awesome. Well, it's funny. I tell you, I think this is one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of young people make is they think that the title affects your ability to kind of be happy and be successful. And I often tell people, I'm sure I've read this or maybe one of my mentors told me this, but there are many, many times that if you can kind of pull back and look at it with, okay, I said I wanted to be a high school basketball coach, and I said I wanted to teach biology. And you kind of dig a little bit into it about like what exactly is it that made you want to coach high school basketball? What exactly is it that made you want to teach biology? And are you actually achieving those goals in what you're doing right now? Because on a kind of professional level, I had written out my 1, 5, and 10-year goals when I was like interviewing. And it was basically centered around setting up a minimally invasive surgery center. Because I mean, at that time, like somewhat similar, and like this is the one thing, like in the world, this stuff just happens over and over again. We all think it's the new moment, but as you get older, you realize. So like what's happening with robotics right now, it was mirror image of what's happening with minimally invasive surgery right when I came out. Was that we need minimally invasive surgery centers. We got to have all this stuff. It's all this input and all this excitement, and it was awesome. So I focused on that and kind of the referral base and all those things. And it was really important to me because these were who my mentors were and these were who I really looked up to. I wanted a surgeon referral practice. I had written that down in one of my things, funny enough. I wanted people to send me pancreas and liver cases that surgeons felt like they couldn't do that I would take on minimally invasively. And so while I didn't achieve any of that and have had a biliary surgery, it's funny, if you look at every single box, I wanted to create a fellowship in minimally invasive liver surgery. Okay, but I didn't do that, but I did it with ab wall reconstruction. I wanted a national referral practice in livers and pancreas. Again, so I think a lot of times, and this is where, it's funny, like people talk about mentoring. And I think in today's world, not university, but just at a high level, and I mean, I was guilty of this when I was younger too. People get confused with mentoring and hearing what you want to hear from an older person, right? Yeah. I think mentoring should be hard. It shouldn't be easy. Sometimes a mentor is telling you something that you disagree with, that you think that mentor is wrong, and they don't understand you, and they don't know your unique skill set, and they're missing the point. And I think it's very easy. I mean, I often look back at myself and think I had this kind of instrumental conversation that changed my life with Jeff Ponsky, right? When he told me you should fix hernias. Oh, I didn't tell that story. I'll tell it real quick. Yeah. So actually, this is my story of why I fix hernias. Because I told you that I want to do livers and whatnot. So when I got to within a couple of weeks, I had clinic with Jeff Ponsky. And that, by the way, my advice to all young surgeons. Now, when you're young, when you're a chief resident, you want to be by yourself, right? They're going to get on my OR, give me autonomy, this stupid autonomy word that doesn't, what I think autonomy is not what residents think autonomy is. It's just terrible word in the dictionary that is just jolting surgical education. because like none of us really define it well, and it doesn't make a great surgeon. It exposes bad surgeons and it exposes good surgeons. It's not the answer, but anyways, that's what you want. Like, get out of my OR, get out of my clinic. I'm a master. But when you're a young attending, you want some gray hair around you, and you want some help, and everything changes in one day. Which that right there should define for everybody. Yeah. Like, autonomy is not the answer, because the minute you actually get it, you're like, nah, I'll take some help, please. If you're safe, and you should take that. Yeah. But I would recommend having clinic with your chair. Not a lot of great things come out of that, because they're not going to give you the greatest cases. You're going to get the cases that they don't want to do. So anyways, I was there. It was maybe like my second or third week. I was literally sitting there kind of wondering, like, why am I even getting paid to do this? I think I had like one Mediport. Like, I'd come from Henneford's Fellowship, where we were literally operating like mad, seeing 50 patients a day. And I was like, stay there. Jeff Ponsky walks out of the room, and he is like smiling from ear to ear. And the medical student behind him, he has his head down, his face looks ashen. He's like, oh my God. The chief resident, she just looks like unhappy and like she just seen something terrible. And he kind of came out, and he goes right to me. He's like, hey, Mike, I'm going to teach you how to make an academic career. I'm like, all right, this guy's done everything in academics. I'm going to listen. He's like, you got to pick something that nobody wants to do, that we don't do very well, and you got to try and make it better. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, all right, what is that? He's like, your thing is hernias. I'm like, okay, I can do some lap angles and lap ventures on the side. Like, that's fine, but I'm not really going to be doing livers. And then he gave me my first patient, and it was like this absolutely insane case where some woman had had a J2 fallout. She had neck fasc, she had 2 fistulas, reconstructed with polypropylene mesh and skin graft. I mean, it was like horrific. It still ranks up as probably like one of the top 5 worst cases I've ever done. And I go and look in the literature, and I'm like, all right, what do I do? Like, I just finished all this training. I'm the man. Like, I look at the literature, like, there's not one thing written about this. I'm like, wow, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, like, why has nobody written about this? And I learned my lesson. Nobody writes about this stuff, because if you write about this stuff, people send you this stuff. And so I was like, I'm in. I'm gonna go fix this lady. So and this is the other thing I like to talk about for young people. I mean, I was really well trained at that time, and what I did to that person is nothing like what I would do today. Mm-hmm. I finished on my training, finished on my fellowship. I was a great surgeon. I mean, I might not have. I thought I was the person, and I completely did the wrong stuff, but I learned along the way. And I think what that taught me, and what I hope everybody gets, is that your residency is not about getting a playbook, right? It's not about this is what you need to do. It's about learning basic skill sets so that you can then go apply them, and you can hopefully make things better and improve things. Because like, everybody thinks we're like at the end, right? Like, we thought laparoscopy is the end of the story. Clearly it's not. Robotics is the next story. Yeah. But there'll be something after robotics. There'll be AI. There'll be AI and robotics. There'll be micro robotics. Like, the story will always go on. And so I think it's easy to focus on the moment. It's more important to focus on, like, how are we doing this? What is the process? Like what can we do to make it better, and that type of stuff, which is sometimes hard to do in the moment. So anyways, yeah.
You had 2 things that you talked about there. One of which, 3 things really I wanted to touch on, and I can give you my opinions, and feel free to tell me if I'm completely off base. One, I think that we choose our mentors incorrectly. And this is from my experience. I chose my mentors incorrectly, not in the fact that I chose the wrong people. I chose people that were absolutely worthy of being mentors. But the problem was I didn't have the awareness, the self-awareness to realize where they were in their career. Because you can have a mentor that you look up to, like a lot of people that would probably look at you, right? If they want to become Mike Rosen, they've got to go through the process that made you Mike Rosen, right? And they don't. If you think that you're going to come out of training and you don't have the self-awareness to realize your kind of place in the world, you have this weird, why am I not? So like, I came out of training wanting to do elective general surgery. That's what I wanted to do. That was what spoke to me. I actually don't mind the clinic. I actually enjoy it. I think that interaction is rewarding to me. As I know I'm kind of an enigma, but and so I wanted to do that side. I came out wanting to do that and didn't realize the aspect of like paying your dues, going through the just brutal call beat down and all that stuff that many people still have to go through to get to that point. And so whenever I was talking to my mentors, you talk about mentors not just telling you what you want to hear. When I was talking to my mentors, they were telling me the things that I needed to hear that were not what I wanted to hear, but I didn't have the self-awareness to realize that it was applying to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's an episode I watch, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's an episode where two of the characters are talking to Charlie and they're like, listen, we don't need a wild card. And Charlie's like, yeah, that guy's crazy. And they're like, we're talking about you. And so, I was Charlie in that situation. The second thing you talk about is like the difference in autonomy as you get to the end of training. And one of the things that kind of always, it is something I experienced significantly, and I've talked about it before, but the first time you go to cut a cystic duct in your first gallbladder, that's the most lonely feeling in the world. You're like, nobody's going to stop me if I'm about to do something horrific right here. Like, there's nobody going to be like, are you sure? Yeah. And so there are those moments that you get out and go, oh, this is a different game. Things I felt confident about a week ago, now it's a completely different scenario. And we talk about autonomy and letting people operate. But one of the things is there's a difference between being able to get through a case and being able to get through a case well. Yeah. And so getting through, a standard outpatient gallbladder and having 150 cc's of blood loss, you're sitting there going, that's not very elegant and probably needs some refining of techniques and things. And sometimes people get a little bit annoyed about being what they would consider, micromanaging the case when they're a chief. So I try to tell people, like, listen, I'm not saying you can't get through the case. I think you're going to be fine. If you're here by yourself, you get through it, the patient will recover. So, but let me just tell you, like, a couple of things that I've learned, like over the years, that have made these look a lot better, the cases progress a lot more smoothly for me. And so that was really kind of the other thing that you brought up that I was just that applies to me.
I would echo what you said. So what I call that survival surgery, right? Mm-hmm. Like the reality is, most people, if you give them a knife, some sutures, and a scissors, you can get through just about everything, and a bogey maybe, right? Like you can take out the pancreas, you could do a liver, you could do a gallbladder, you could certainly do a hernia, you can do all that stuff. And there is this battle. And again, I mean, look, you want residents that want it. You want people that want to be great, right? Like this gets back to kind of being the basketball coach, right?
Yeah.
Like what is the joy that you get out of that? And I kind of say that, this is kind of where I think there's a bit of a fundamental breakdown in some of these type of things. And it's a little bit of, take the resident's perspective. Why do they want autonomy, right? Because that's where they feel like they're learning to be who they're going to be. Mm-hmm. Now, as an expert at this, that's like telling somebody to go to the gym and practice bad technique.
Right.
The ball is still going to go in sometimes. Like if you shoot with poor technique, the ball will go in. You will score if you work hard. Right. But you're not going to be the best basketball player that you could be. And again, likewise, the story of incredible basketball athletes that don't turn into great basketball players has been told many, many times, because just like in surgery and medicine and life, right? Like people have a hard time taking coaching. There's a lot of people that it's not a good coach, right? That's not a good fit for me. And that's because they're hearing what they really need to hear, and they don't want to hear that.
Sure.
So I think that, I think there's a little bit in today's culture, and I don't blame the residents for this. It's kind of how the world is. It's like if you don't like what you're hearing, you go hear something else. And it's become much, much easier to do that. So I think you have to be hyper aware of that. You got to still be able to find a way to communicate with people where they can be at. But again, I always tell people, I'm like, if you're my fellow, I've got 1 year with you. Like, that's it, to impart everything I've learned. Like, I know you can get through this on your own. I want to make you do this to the best of your ability. Like, I have to watch your every move. I have to comment. But I will say, this is one thing I've learned. Actually, it's something that's really, I've been able to do at Northwestern much easier, just because of some technological advances here that we didn't have in Cleveland, is, and I'll liken this to coaching, and I would give this to both any learner, like a resident or fellow, but also to a attendee, is that and this is a good parallel to coaching. You cannot really do a lot of coaching during the game, right?
Yes.
Like during a basketball game, you're kind of somewhat, you're not coaching technique.
Right.
You're coaching the flow, you're coaching the approach, you're not coaching the minutia of the game. If you start to do that, you get into people's minds and they're not going to perform well. Mm-hmm. So I think that the same thing is true for surgery, in that the learner is stressed, they're anxious. As you get older, as an attending, and more people want to impress you, maybe you have an impact on their job, their how they feel, all this stuff, it gets harder and harder and harder for people to perform in that moment. Or not to perform, to learn in that moment. Right, yeah. And so here it's been awesome. All the laparoscopic and robotic cases, they're all recorded with, I can't remember the name of the site. Mm-hmm. So I spend 1 hour, the way my process here is I have one chief for every 2 months. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. It's like an apprentice thing. They do everything with me. And there's always like a bell-shaped curve or whatever, but still, it's great to work with one person. And so we spend 1 hour a week reviewing the film of their choice. And that's where our teaching part goes. That's where we can slow it down and say, look, when I tell you to pull this way, you see how you're not doing it. Yeah. And it's a calm moment. And to me, I always said, if you don't watch film on Monday in basketball, you will never get good. If you don't watch what you did in the game, sometimes it's embarrassing, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Yeah. It's hard to do in front of the whole team. But if you haven't, if you think about any sport that involves technical skill, as they all do, if you aren't watching film, you are not getting better. Mm-hmm. And so I think taking the time, especially now with the robot, it's easy. Yeah. Take the time to watch that film with the person who's teaching you and be open to that, and do it in a kind of where the time doesn't matter. You're not trying to get to the next case, and everybody's calm. I think that's something that I've done here. It was really hard to do in Cleveland because we couldn't really record stuff because of IP things and everything. So here it's been a huge advance. I don't know how many people really take advantage of it. But, for me, again, going back, I'd like to be a coach. I want, what joy do I get out of the OR? Like you said, too, by the way, my favorite place nowadays, I love the clinic. The clinic as a surgeon is different than when you're a resident, because it's people who you're establishing a relationship with. It's people who you made better, hopefully, or it's people who you didn't make better. Yeah. And you got to kind of, stay engaged and still be with them and kind of work through that with your patient. And so I totally enjoy clinic and that thing. In fact, there's kind of this thing now where so I can see more new people. We want our APPs to see all the post-ops and the follow-ups. Yep. And I do that a little bit now, to be honest, because it's really hard to get into my clinic. Mm-hmm. But I do think that you need to see your post-ops, or else this job kind of becomes hard, because you you can forget why you are a surgeon. I'm a big fan of, and I'm sure we'll dig into this more, but I think if there's one thing I would tell you, that everybody, every young person, every old person, every surgeon, if you want to have a long career that you can retire and feel happy about, make sure that the spotlight is on the patient at all times. Everything that you do, when you take on something new, when you say you won't do something, when you won't refer someone, when you take on an operation, ask yourself, am I doing what's best for this patient? And if you are, you'll live a long, healthy, prosperous life. You won't always do what's best for patients. sometimes what we do is hard and people get hurt. But if you start from the start with, this is about the patient. It's not about me. It's not about what I can do. It's not about what I can build. It's not about my national, priorities, all that type of stuff. I think that's the key. And I'll take one last thing. I don't want to forget to answer the first part of your question, which is mentoring, people say they want to be like Mike Rosen. So let me just say this. Let me say this. First of all, more than anything, you should always, if your goal is to be famous and kind of have that notoriety, just step back for a minute and I would just self-reflect on that. And to be honest, unfortunately, like I think there's a lot of that right now in hernia surgery. I don't have a lot of perspective on everything else. I'm sure it's true everywhere. I think there's a little bit of like the world that we live in right now is a much harder world than when I grew up. There's social media. There's the ability to be seen nationally while you're on your maturation phase.
Yes.
There's an ability to say things that won't go away, that you say, and you, like I've always said, like, I have adult kids now. So, right, so when my kid texts or calls my wife and kind of like dumps their stuff on my wife, my kids are over in 5 minutes. They're done. My wife carries it with her for the next week. Yes. and like absorbs that. So I think that, you know, I didn't have to deal with that. I mean, God, for God's sakes, if there was social media when I was younger, I probably would be in jail. Like, I mean, I would not have been mature enough to handle social media. So this is not from a place of criticism. I couldn't do it. It's more of a place of sympathy. So I think that kind of understanding that is key. And then again, for me, I did. I mean, my goal, right, I wanted to have this practice where I could take on these patients and do this type of stuff. But there's another piece. There's kind of two pieces to this, I think, that are important. The other thing is it's just an incredible amount of luck, right? Like sometimes it's just timing. And I kind of credit anything that I have achieved to a certain extent is I got lucky. It was like a magical moment in time where kind of complex ab wall started taking off. Biologic mesh became a big thing. And it kind of swept up this whole hernia thing. And I was just like at the right moment at the right time. And the only credit I'll give myself is I didn't just say, hey, I don't want to do this. I'm doing liver surgery. Like I just like at least opened my mind to it. And after that, it was working hard, which again, I feel like to me, actually that's another like good little thing is it's like, you know, people find it hard. They're like, well, how do you do this? How do you find the time? And like, and this always gets in this conversation of like work-life balance. And I, if I could impart any other wisdom on people, I heard this great lecture. I can't remember the guy's name, but I took this like leadership development course when I got to Northwestern at Northwestern Kellogg, which was like incredible. And this guy was the CEO of, I can't remember what company right now, but he gave an incredible talk and it really kind of resonated with me. He said what I would say in a much more elegant way, which was that the whole concept of work-life balance is bad. That's not a good concept because what that basically means is both things are pulling against each other, right? And it's like a fight. Right. And so often when you're at work, you're trying to balance your life. And when you're in your life, you're dealing with your work. So what he said is it should just be life balancing, right? And in life balancing, you have your 5 priorities. Like what are they? Like they're basically come down to your job, your health, exercise, family, you know, religious things, and potentially some other hobby or whatever that is. I can't remember exactly the 5 things are. And then you just figure out what percentage what are your priorities, right? Like if family is your 5th priority, then so be it. But then don't complain if your family doesn't like you when you're 16 years old, right? If job is all you care about, if your family is what you care about and they're 1 or 2, then make sure you carve out the time for them and be there. And that's the other part of this is I think being present at work and being present at home, and don't blur those lines. Doesn't matter what the mix-up is; it's different for everybody. Yeah. But anyway, so I think that you know there are no shortcuts to long-term notoriety in something, right? Like, there are no shortcuts. I think be honest, be true, be willing to withstand criticism, keep your focus where it should be. And then my only other thing I would just like, my luck is I've had great partners who have done great things throughout my time, who are incredible people, who if I have guided in any way or collaborated with any way, like I mean, a lot of it is their hard work and just kind of be able to get out of the way and let those people be great. I think that's how I got where I am. It's not some magical thing. It's not some magical thing that like one day I just woke up with this thing. I was like, oh my God, this is it. So I think that's, if I could tell all young people, like just take a breath, like let it happen. It doesn't have to happen overnight. And by the way, sometimes once it happens, you don't even like it. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
enjoy this as much as I thought I would. Like I mean, there's no question. I get much more joy out of spending time with my kids in the background, right? Like that's my joy. I love that.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyways.
Yeah. It's funny because I just turned 41 this week, and so I'm kind of in that phase of the career where I've heard that your 40s are kind of a really impactful period of time for a surgeon's career normally. Just because kind of we all get out and usually you're getting into practice at some point in our 30s, and then like that 40s, you kind of have your feet under you. You're not freaking out every time you cut a cystic duct, so to speak, and then you have that developmental phase where things are starting to kind of take off. Hopefully, if that's what you want. I did something. I took like the opposite approach of you, and I would absolutely support your approach. I did college in 3 years and went straight to medical school in 4, and I was an attending surgeon like a month and a half after I turned 30. And if I would do it, it's hard to argue with where I am now. Like I'm happy with what I've accomplished so far. And like you said about my kid, I have 2 kids, and they're the accomplishment I'm happy about, and everything kind of led to that. So I wouldn't, it's like the butterfly effect. You don't want to change one thing that could just disrupt other things that are just beyond amazing. But I got all the way through my training and came out of training and then have been kind of in a crisis, and even up till now, like, who am I? Because when you have your head down in a book, and my friends were out exploring the world, partying, doing whatever they wanted to do through college, and I was always like, well, studying, or I was working 2 part-time jobs while I was taking 18 hours of college. This was after I had played a year of college basketball, which absolutely, talk about getting into something, being like, wow, I hate this. that was college basketball for me. I was just like, nope. But the other thing about that is one of the reasons I didn't like it is I don't think I took coaching very well. I had a very aggressive coach who's actually an extremely good friend of mine now. He was very aggressive, told me what I needed to hear. I was so terrified of failure that it really shaped my whole experience. I mean, I was a guard, I was a 3-point shooter and everything like that. And that was and I was a defender. I was really a 3-and-D guy before that was the thing. And it was not a flashy player, was a guy that was always where I was supposed to be, set the picks, took the charges, always got my defensive rotations right, was tipping the ball, rebound came off. I wasn't getting the rebound most of the time, but my guy definitely wasn't, and that's kind of how I played. And so the stuff that I needed to hear probably to become that next version of a player, but really kind of the next version of a maturing into a manhood for me at the time, or adulthood, it was said to me in a way that I was not used to taking, and it kind of shocked me a little bit, made me really uncomfortable even all the way through my training. So the surgeons that were more aggressively direct with me, looking back, it was not anything I had any self-awareness of at the time, but looking back, I think I shied away from opportunities that would really been good learning points for me in residency because I didn't like that kind of like being brought on me, sometimes brutal truths about like that wasn't a very good move or that wasn't a very good operation. Right. It was definitely not like an ego thing. I wasn't like indignant and be like, oh, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It was just, it hit me at such a point in my core because I don't think I ever had that maturity process of going to South Africa to study.
I'll tell you what I think about that. So I think a lot about this stuff, and I've read a lot of, I love to read all these type of books and this type of stuff. I try and read every night before I go to bed for at least like 30 minutes, and I'm an avid reader and love it. And I tend to read like a leadership book and then a mystery. And because if you read too many leadership books at once, it gets like, you start to hate them because somebody once said, I think it's so true, like most leadership books are 300 pages, but they could be 50.
Yes.
But I think like, so my interpretation of what you described, and I may or may not be right about this, is, and I have a very good example with my oldest daughter, who's a medical student. It's a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. And so I would tell you, so my oldest daughter, she was a really competitive tennis player. Mm-hmm. And she made varsity when she was a freshman. Mm-hmm. And I watched her at the tryouts, and she was absolutely incredible. I was like, I can't believe this is my daughter. Like, it was amazing trying out. But then when she made the team, she would not play at the level that she tried out at. And her coach, who my daughter hated, was beating her to death about it. And I actually talked to the coach after, I was like, hey, like, what can I do to help my daughter? Like, you know, it's weird. And she's like, well, I'm going to tell you the thing about your daughter. And by the way, I think this is such a good learning point for most surgeons, because in order to get what you did, what we all did, you all have the same trait. When you are a straight A student, you are not used to failing, and you can control your environment by studying and what you're good at. So then when you are put in a situation where you must fail, you do not know how to handle that because you have never failed, right? And I think that this is one of the things about, I always say, like, we're picking the wrong people for medical school. We're picking the wrong people and once you get the wrong people in medical school, you get the wrong people in residency. In order to get to medical school, you must be perfect. If you have a failure, if you have a C when you were younger, you're done, right? Like, it's not the person we want. If you didn't do well on your board, but then you overcame some other great things, well, that's the one strike. We don't want you. And I've always felt that things must be very, very different. Like, I'm looking for the person who failed at one moment in their life and then woke up, rebounded, and overcame that. Because, first of all, that is 100% what surgical residency is failing every day, getting better, and coming back to it. And it's very difficult to do that at that age in your life when you really have not been able to fail or you wouldn't be there. And so I think that is number one. Number two is, you know, for me, when you do a fellowship, you operate with me. My philosophy is I continue to elevate. So if you start off here, you are going to feel like a failure until you get to the top. If you start off here, it doesn't matter where you start. I will elevate it because sometimes, like when you're younger, you got to think about what is my perspective as your teacher. I must make you better. If you're already good, okay, the pressure's on me to make you great. If you're already great, the pressure on me. So that is the difference. And I don't really know. This gets into like the whole grit thing. If you haven't read, anybody out there, if you haven't read the book Grit, I love that book. And it talks about it's a very similar story, which you just told, Luke, which is that, like, to get into West Point, you have to be like valedictorian, state championship. Like, I mean, these people are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And something like, I don't know, 15, 20% quit within the first year, because at West Point, you will fail your first year. Something. They're there to make sure that you can overcome that. And so I think that, you know, this is the process. And I think maybe like seeing the world helps with that a little bit. But I think there's just so many other things that that people forget, that, you know, I've experienced failure. We've all experienced failure. I carry that failure with me as a chip on my shoulder every day.
Yep.
I mean, I can tell like it's a crazy story. It's so long ago, but like, I remember the day. Like, so I went to Vanderbilt for college, but not like now. Like Vanderbilt, I would never have gotten into Vanderbilt now. Like my oldest daughter went to Vanderbilt, and she reminds me of that daily. But I had gotten 2 C's when I was a freshman in high school because I played basketball like literally all the time. And then I moved schools and I got straight A's the rest of my time. And I did good on the SAT or whatever it was, but I only got into that one college. I got into one college. I applied to a ton of different places, and I applied to a bunch of high places. I got rejected from everywhere else. And I was like devastated by that. And I, to this day, I take that to realize that when you start somewhere, that first day matters. And everything you do that day matters, and you must work hard that first day. And I took that failure to me every day of my life, and I still carry it with me. And that is why, like, everybody has their own failure stories, right? Like when you take care of patients, when you do complex things, you have your morbidities. I mean, unfortunately, your mortalities. And that is the question: can you take that stuff? Can you internalize that stuff? Make you better, not let it destroy you, which is hard. Make you better, and go. And that, to me, right, that's the growth mentality. That is the I'm here to get better. And I will say, I think the growth, if you haven't ever read about growth and fixed mentality, it's such a great concept to me. But I also think that that's not what you were born with. And that is not this is your capacity. I think these are all things that can be worked on, that can be developed. They first must be acknowledged. And I think in surgery, this is one of the things that makes surgery so hard. And quite frankly, why a lot of people have trouble being successful, is that as you push it in surgery, there are going to be failures. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be criticisms. There are going to be public things now because of all this stuff. And kind of being able to withstand that and keep your north, or change because you realize that, hey, maybe I'm not right here, and kind of grow from that. And I think like everything in life, you know, the older you get, the more perspective you have, the more of an adult you become. And so part of this is just growing up. I think in medicine, we're somewhat like institutionalized, and you're a little bit like, I mean, I think most of our like emotional and intellectual growth is stunted when you go into surgery, because you like, you were stuck in college studying all the time. You're in medical school trying to get to residency, and then you get to your residency, and by the time you're mid-30s, like, I mean, a lot of life has passed you by. And so I think that you grow up the first 10 years as a young attending to learn how to be an adult, basically. And I think, and you know, sometimes that's hard because you're like, now that I, you know, lead younger people, you're like, I mean, come on, you're like 37 years old, like wake up. But I think that is the kind of the nature of the being of medicine, especially surgery. I mean, it's just so long. So I think that's why, to the point of like taking some time off, seeing things, it gives you a moment to mature, realize that life is more than just about you, and hopefully develop some growth stuff. 'Cause I've always felt like the more you see around, right, the more perspectives you have, the more you realize that, like, wow, like I don't know it all. Wow, my life is different than these people's lives. Like, when I say things that are relevant to me, that I believe passionately, that might not be what this other person who is equally right believes in. And I think, you know, it takes time to develop that. And that's okay. It's okay. But in today's world, like I said before, it's a little harder because a lot of this growth and maturation is happening online in front of thousands of people that don't know what your flippant comment was that you didn't even think about. Right. Now is like, you know, it's really upsetting people. So
well, we lose sound bites don't have context, and so even things that have been snipped, even things that I've said that have been snipped for like news publications or something, I go like, woof, that makes me sound horrific. That was not the point at all. But anyway, that's I could have a whole hour-long discussion on that. You talk about coming through and learning how to fail. I think that and let me say I'll say I think that I never learned how to fail successfully, meaning take a failure and not have it reflect so heavily on who I was as a human being that it was so white hot I couldn't look at it. You know what I mean? Like it takes self-reflection and self-awareness to examine your failures, to learn from them. But if you are so tied to your success being your self-worth, which many of us I think are in our perfectionism and what it takes to get, like you said, what it takes to get to where we are, sometimes is so the bar is so high that really failure has never been an option. And so it stunted my growth as a surgeon heavily. Still does. Like I still struggle with it on failures, and being able to step back and look at a failure and go like, okay, what does it look like to fail, and not just think I'm just like a horrific surgeon and shouldn't be doing this, and learn from that. One thing that I struggle with, and I would love you said something earlier about it, but one thing I struggle with is looking at failures from the past. So say I had a patient I operated on like 4 years ago, and I did a surgery that at the time I was convinced was the right surgery. And realistically, with our knowledge of everything and kind of what the general consensus was, it probably was the right surgery at that moment. I look back now and I look at the CT scan and I go, I would never do that surgery for that problem now, ever. Like it would be completely different. And the patient had a complication from it. And I'm struggling with a couple of cases that I look back and go, and it's hard to forgive myself because I take it so personal. It's hard to give myself the grace of going like, hey, I made the best decision with the information I had at the time. And I probably wasn't necessarily wrong then, but the field and knowledge and techniques have advanced. And now that's not really what I would do for that. How do you handle it whenever, especially in your situation, you're pushing the forefront, right?
Yeah,
so it's not like you're sitting there reacting to other people. Many times you're the person or you're the research people are reacting to. Not everything is successful. And looking back and going like, man, that person got hurt, or maybe they had a less than ideal outcome from something that I did. How do you reconcile that? Because that's something I need to grow on.
I'll do that, but I'll end it with something that I promoted. So I have a lot of experience with that. So let me just say, first of all, when I was like maybe my second year out, I'll give you another Jeff Ponsky story. I kind of went up to Ponsky and I'm like, hey, like at what point in my life am I going to be able to sleep the night before a big case and not be anxious about it? And he gave me the best answer. I still tell this to every young person. I'm like, the day you can do that is probably the day you should stop operating. And so I think that there is a little bit of just giving yourself the grace that being anxious and nervous before you're about to do big things to patients is actually normal. It's actually the hard part about this great job is that it is you. You are the ones making decisions. You are the ones, these people are putting their lives in your hands. You are the ones who carry that burden. And the minute that you lose sight of that is when it's no longer about them and it starts to become about you. And that's where things get off the rails, in my view of things. And so I think that responsibility is challenging. And I don't really have like a magical thing other than having really good partners, people that you can talk to, your spouse who either does or does not do this stuff, and try not to carry it with you to the best of your ability, but also carry it with you as a way to learn and do better. So I think there's a balance in that. The idea that, you've never failed and you can't do that, I share that too. I mean, I think, listen, surgeons are judgmental people. Surgeons are competitive people. We have a lot of demons that make it hard on ourselves that we will not acknowledge. Like, there's no question that surgeons feel much more comfortable attacking other people than self-reflection. And I mean, I'm not even saying that as a negative. Like, I understand why it takes those things to be a good surgeon. So that's not a negative. That's more of just be aware of that and think about it to yourself and think about it. And so the kind of like the second victim thing, I believe in that wholeheartedly when you're young. But even when you're older, like, I mean, when I get complications, I can't sleep at night. Like, when I have people who are sick in the hospital, I'm up worried about it. When I have somebody who I maybe should take back or I don't, like, I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I still, like, it hurts. So I don't think that ever goes away. I don't think it probably, I mean, it's terrible to say this, but I kind of think it probably should never go away. You must be able to manage it, though. You must be able to manage it. But it is the part that makes this job hard, but it's also the part, I think, to give my next answer to your question, that is, if you take it and you take it internally and you deal with that, and then you can find a way to open-mindedly, not defensively, and I mean, I think this part of that is just growing up, to be able to, the ability to say, I might be wrong, is really hard for people. And I think it's particularly hard when you're younger nowadays, for all the reasons we've already talked about. It's really hard because you got on this bandwagon, you're out there, you're promoting. I mean, especially if you happen to be promoting something that aligns with industry, and now you're a speaker, which I have been. This is not me being critical. Actually, I'll just tell you my story, right? Like, this is, I mean, I was the number one, I don't know if I was number one, but like I was up there for biologic mass, right? Like, I was driving the ship. I was teaching people how to operate, teaching people about mass. I thought it was great. I loved it. I thought I was helping people. And then all of a sudden I looked at the data 5 years later. I was like, oh my God, like it's not that good. Like we were wrong. And I always tell people, like when I published that paper, there's no question in my mind. I was like, uh-oh, like I'm making a lot of money from these companies. Like I'm on every single podium. I'm flying all over the world. Like, are they going to be okay with me doing this? Like that conflict is so real.
Yes.
And I think that's where we get kind of, people get crazy that like, I don't have a conflict. Yeah, of course you have a conflict. It's conflict management. It's not conflict avoidance. It's fine to have those conflicts.
Right.
But like managing them. So I went through all that. And then I was like, he hates us. He wants to see us fail. He'd rather be with this other company. And I was just like, I mean, my gosh, like this stuff just didn't work like I thought it was. Then we did a randomized controlled trial. And so listen, I think all of that stuff is learning things. We all went through it 20 years ago, so it's not new, okay? It's the same old thing, but it's much more public now. It's much more difficult. I also think being a surgeon now, it's harder because there's all these measurements, there's these quality rankings, your mortality, your readmission. Like I didn't have any of that stuff when I was younger. I did not have those stressors that people have now, where there's all these people measuring you. So that I think the other thing is just to like, I would just say, and this is why I look at it as a positive thing when I talk to people, it's have the confidence to self-reflect and then be like, And I would just say, I mean, this is where mentors really come into play. And now anybody who's watching this podcast, if you get to a moment where you're like, uh-oh, should I be doing this anymore? Feel free to call me. I'd be happy to chat with you. I've had many, many, many of those moments. I think kind of the whole field of complex ab wall reconstruction for me has been somewhat of an eye-opening experience where I've certainly been through some of that stuff. I think for me, what was transformative that I did not appreciate is when we started the Abdominal Core Health Quality Collaborative. And we have private practice surgeons, like solo private practice. We have community surgeons. We have big academic. We have academic affiliated. And I review the data we put out for these foundation partner reports, and I just see it at a very high level. And nobody's individual data, but I see like the conglomerate data like every quarter. And it kind of opened my eyes up where I'll never forget this moment where I was like, wow, like, the average incisional hernia in our collaborative of 500 surgeons is like 4 or 5 centimeters, right? So when I'm running around talking about my 15 to 20 centimeter hernias, like I'm not sure that it's relevant for people in the audience. Like and that was a moment probably like, I don't know, like maybe 12, 13 years into my career where I just thought, if you fixed incisional hernias, you saw what I saw. I don't know why I thought it sounds so stupid when I say it now, but like I thought that that's what complex ab wall reconstruction was, and it kind of opened my mind up to like, wait a second, like I might be saying my perspective that is not everybody else's perspective. And then we started seeing complications come in, and I would go back and look at images, and I'd be like, whoa. Like, I would not have done that. And so there was kind of a self-reflection of like, what's happening here? And I think that, listen, when you've promoted something and you've like engaged in it and stuff, it's hard to do that. I will say, we kind of went back to like, how do you become like Rosen or whatever? Please don't have that as your goal, but if you did, then I would just say like, what I've learned probably the most is if you want longevity, don't be afraid to be honest about this stuff. Like it's kind of one of those things like you resist it, obviously, but after you do it, then you realize like everything in life, right? Like there's the extremes on both ends who are very loud, and then there's all these people in the middle who actually just want the truth, right? Like it's very much like our political world right now.
Yes.
There's extremes that are blasting it out, and you're like, oh God, if I say this extreme is going to hate me, or this extreme is going to hate me. Right. But 80% of the world is just sitting in the middle. It's like, oh, that makes sense. Thank you for saying that. And so I think to me, that's been a big, like, that's a positive thing. That should make you feel comfortable. Just kind of, people kind of migrate to people the people in the middle, which is the majority, migrate to just honest people who are just trying to do a good job. And then there's certainly people that migrate to the extremes. And again, I think that's totally okay. I mean, that's fine. The world is a bell curve. Like there's extremes on either end, and most people live in the middle. But I think you just have to figure out like kind of where do you want to be. And I think for short term kind of growth, notoriety, be at the extremes. It'll happen quick, but then it goes quick. You want to kind of live your life in the middle. And it's okay to be passionate that you think that you're right. My message to people though is when you see the data and when you look at it, it's rarely an easy answer. And by the way, every single randomized control trial that I have done almost invariably proves that I was wrong. And like, it's not what I thought it was. And then you have to like come to grips with that and find a way to like interpret that data and still be honest about it.
Yeah. I have the three things about what you just said that I'd love to get your opinion on. First of all, in the spirit of truth and humbleness and honesty. So I had this complication, and it was a reef stopa, and it was a posterior sheath failure, and I was really struggling with it at that moment. I was very much struggling with it, and just questioning like, man, should I have left the diastasis alone? That this person, like all these like thoughts. That every time I have a case that goes well, I struggle with it. Like I struggle with I'm always like terrified of hurting someone, and so I'm always in this moment of really doubling down to make sure that I don't. Well, this is funny, but I was in the middle. I was sitting in the doctor's lounge, and I'm sitting there thinking about this case. I'm trying to decide like what I'm going to do, and my buddy sends me an article on the text. He goes, "Hey, check this out," and it was a New York Times article that you're quoted heavily in. And I was like, and I read it, and I was like. It like literally put me like into a panic attack. I was like, "Oh my God, did I like overoffer?" And so anyway, I could say, you know, what I will say is that the people that have the voice and things that you have, it has a dramatic impact even on that 80%, because we do look to people who are pushing the boundaries to kind of help set our compass. I think that people who are trying to stay up to date with the literature, trying to stay up to date and offer our patients the most current beneficial repairs or things like that in hernia. I think that we have the best of intentions, but at times, you know, you can kind of hear whichever voice piece is the loudest at the time, and it may shift the whole middle, right? Because many of us, you don't have the time to go out and do the primary research ourselves. Sometimes it is we know our data, but we're not. But, you know, we're being forced contractually or what have you, the pressures of the realities of our practice to get out there, and we're not putting it into the database as frequently or as we should and things like that. And it's not that we don't care, and it's not that we don't think that it's very, very important. It's just that when at the end of the day, I'd either sit here and put in this database stuff because they won't give us the person to help put it in, or I'm going to go home and spend an hour with my kids before they go to bed, you know, and that's really kind of like honestly the check marks that I'm like struggling with. And
let me put that on for you. So I would just say a couple things. I think first of all, the one thing that I have learned is that literally, almost exclusively, very, very few exceptions. There are obviously exceptions. The vast majority of people just want to do the right thing, and they want to go home to their kids, and they don't want to hurt people. Like 100%. I believe that to my core. And I think there are probably a few people that are swaying things, maybe because of industry and stuff. But even those people, I bet you in their heart of hearts, they believe that they're doing the right thing. So I don't think I think very, very, very rarely on the surgeon side of this is there nefarious activity going on. But what the message of what I would give to all surgeons, and this is what's hard for people, is to accept the uncertainty of why we are doing what we are doing. And so the reality is, like, why do things change? But I mean, I can only speak to hernia surgery. I don't know how much this is true in other things. I have no idea. But I do know for a fact in hernia surgery, like, why do we go over here? Then we go over here. Then we go over here. Then we go over here. Why do we do that? Well, we do that because invariably there is a person who might happen to be an incredible public speaker, a very dynamic person, who often is doing one of two things. Like me, they're trying to take care of a very unique patient population that they have. And they're innovative people, and they're trying to innovate within their world for that. Or they're a person that got very advanced training, perhaps in a fellowship or even in their residency, and they are great laparoscopic people, great open people, great robotic people. And so they have this skill set that they are trying to apply to their specific patient population because they have the skill set. Equally, if any one of those people align with industry, and let me just address industry for a moment here. And the reality is, when we talk about robotics, it's intuitive. Like, I'm going to start out by saying I have the most respect for Intuitive as a company. I think that they are probably one of the most well-run companies I've ever seen in this space. But they are, and this is like any company, mass companies, robotic companies, and they're about to be more robotic companies. These are for-profit companies that many of us are invested in our mutual funds, and you probably don't even know that. Okay, so you want them to run like a great company. But those two things, a person who is innovative and excited, and a company that aligns with that, creates the potential for exponential growth without safety. And that, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that any one of those people are coming from a bad place. But for the rank and file surgeon that is just out there being like, how do I digest this information and know what to do with my patients? No, without even knowing your own, well, and actually, and then, like you said, for all the reasons you said, which are all fair and accurate, like our system is set up for volume, right?
Yes.
And churn out cases and long-term stuff. Even if you want to know it, it's hard to know it. Even if you want to know your data. And like the reality is, accept the uncertainty also of most of us. I mean, 95, 99% of us don't know our own data, right? We don't know long-term what we're doing until you see that complication. You're devastated, like, oh my God. But you don't know what your true denominator, you don't know how many of these things aren't diagnosed. It's hard to know that information. So there's that level of uncertainty. So I think that if I could give that message, like, how do we function in this world, right? Like, there's not going to be a randomized controlled trial for every single person. And even randomized controlled trials, look, when I do a randomized controlled trial with an open TAR, trust me, that data is not relevant for very, very, very many people out in the world, because they're not going to do a TAR like how I do a TAR. So there's this like expertise bias. Same thing if Alfred Carbonell does a robotic TAR thing, right? Like, his data is not relevant to me doing robotic surgery. He is different. He's much, much more elite than I am. So even randomized controlled trials, that's not the answer. So to me, the answer is all of us as surgeons accept the uncertainty of the environment and be skeptical and take a moment to be like, am I just doing this because pressure from my rep? This person's a great public speaker. I just saw a really cool video that, like, maybe I don't have that skill set for, but they just showed me the post-op follow-ups, and in the 2-week follow-up, I didn't see any long-term data. Like, that's my message, is to be skeptical, number one. Number two, just for take the time, let's talk about this New York Times article.
Yeah, I'd love to.
I that's another way to be relevant is to be memorable. Somebody told me that is be memorable. Yeah. So the other part of this, I think this is true for leaders. If you get lucky enough or unlucky enough to become a leader, is to be comfortable speaking out when you think things have gotten too far, acknowledging that there will be prices to pay for that stuff. And I think that in today's world, way outside of hernia surgery, this is true now, right? Like, there's a price to pay for, like, and maybe there needs to be a correction, maybe there doesn't. In my view, there happened to be. So that New York Times article, funny enough, I actually didn't call the New York Times. They had called me because I had written the paper with the largest amount of component separations. And so they kind of wanted my take. And at that time, I have to say, like, I was seeing a lot of people in clinic, I still do, who were being harmed by this operation for relatively, like, when I went back and looked, if I was being honest, it's like relatively small hernias. People were getting very aggressive operations. And I I kind of fundamentally did not think that was the right thing to do. So the way the New York Times stuff works is I got interviewed twice. You don't get to see the article. You don't have any say in the words. You see it when it comes out. And I would say this about that article. Interestingly enough, I asked the reporter, I'm like, listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm happy to participate in this, but I don't like the concept that most of what you guys write is just exposing the negative without offering a solution. I just don't find this to be like helpful. And she said something that like resonated with me, and I think that there's a good story to it, and there's a story that didn't happen. Is that she's like, well, listen, our job is to put a spotlight on the problem. Your job as surgeons and surgical societies is to either address it or ignore it, right? And so I think that there were kind of like four parts of it that were in that article, and like some of them, quite frankly, like I disagree with, and some of them I agree with. And for me, I think that there was kind of that perfect storm, as we've alluded to already, is that, I think you had a robot company that was taking off. You had some speakers who were pushing very advanced robotic techniques, and again, I think in their hands they were getting great results. And I don't think these folks were doing it to hurt people, but I think that they often did not think about the consequences of when the rank and file people are out there doing some of these things. People, like what could be the harm? And we often have trouble as surgeons considering like what I do might do this well for patients, which is great.
Right.
But we often struggle with the counter argument, which is what is the harm that I might be causing people, and should I do this? And these are the lessons we learn the hard way. And so I think that article, I think it was successful in starting the conversation. I think it was successful in quite frankly, like the people that lashed out at it the most, I think, that's equally like, these are the the 5%. The 5% who think all hernia surgeons are, industry people who are paid to say these things. Like, I don't agree with those people. And the 5% of people who are like, if you say anything against us, you're the worst human being in the world. That's not the position to be in. I think it kind of got people in the middle. And my final take, I actually saw a patient from Connecticut who came down to see me. And I got the notes and everything. And this is why I'll never regret that article, no matter what it cost me, is that it was a guy with a 1.8 centimeter umbilical hernia, no diastasis, no prior surgeries. And I got the note from the surgeon. He was booked for a robotic TAR.
Right.
And I did a 20-minute lap IPOM. He went home the same day.
Right.
And I think to myself, listen, TAR is a great operation. Robo-TAR has its place. Of course it does. But we have to acknowledge, it shouldn't be that hard if we're patient first. Right. To say something's gone off the rails here, and we can correct it without going nuts about it, and kind of falling into what our political parties have done. Yeah. But again, I'm also old enough to be okay with the fact that that's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard to do that. It's hard for people to change. It's hard for people to look back. There's this whole thing. If the NIH is listening, which I'm sure if they are, please do.
If the NIH is listening to this podcast, then they probably should be doing better things.
No. So this is my key. There's every grant that you submit now.
Yeah.
There's this whole thing about implementation science, where when you do a randomized controlled trial, you need a plan that once those results come out, how are you going to change everybody, right? I'm a big believer in we need equal amount of work in what I would call de-implementation science. How do we get people to stop doing what we now know is probably not the right thing to do without you feeling like you're not good enough. You did it wrong. It's, this person's better than me. How do we get it back to that? And there's so many things in surgery where we thought it was great. We've learned that we were wrong, but there's so many people that can't get off that bandwagon because it's well, it's good in my hands. Well, but do you really know if it's good in your hands? Like,
Right.
it's hard to know. My life is about collecting data.
Yeah.
And even me, if I get 60% follow-up, hounding patients, I'm happy. And that's missing almost half the people. I have no idea what's happening. So,
Right.
so I think that again, that's like kind of the be okay with the uncertainty, and then, be a little skeptical, be a little resistant. And I think if that article makes you step back and be like, then I'm like thrilled and I'm happy I did it. It definitely, like, it's crazy how some of the people's response. Like, I'm a big, can we just have a conversation?
Yeah.
So some surgeon called my chair at the time and said that I need to be brought up to the conduct board because I'm trying to do insider trading on Intuitive stock.
Oh, wow.
So I'm a big believer in this. Said, okay, give me the name of the guy. I'm going to call him myself. And like, let me just have a conversation with him.
Sure.
So I called the guy. I called every single person who had a negative thing to say about it and said, hey, can we just have a conversation? Like, I just want you to know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
'Cause I didn't write that article. I'm quoted. I don't agree with everything, but I just would like you to hear my perspective, and I want to hear your perspective. And funny enough, as it turns out, I did go back and look because I'm like, I wonder if I am invested in Intuitive. And my investment guy, in his mutual funds, I have some Intuitive stock,
Sure.
as I think everybody does.
Oh, yeah.
So so not only was I not shorting it, I hurt myself doing it unknowingly.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I had a good conversation with that guy, and I think that is my, I mean, we could talk about this stuff for hours. The concept that we cannot debate anything anymore without anybody getting like butthurt and emotional is sad to me, because a lot of these things just deserve to be debated and discussed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree 100% with the discussion. That's why we're having it. I mean, I wanted to talk. Truthfully, I wanted to talk to you about the article because I had a suspicion that it's in the middle. I was out talking about ERAS and multimodal pain control. That was one of the things that early in my career I realized it was something that I was focused on. And I did a bunch of interviews about multimodal pain control with opioid minimization. And it was right during the middle of the rise of the overdose crisis. And let me rephrase. It was not in the rise of the overdose crisis. It was when it became in vogue to publish articles about it, which is a very different thing, because it was going on for a long time. And then all of a sudden everybody latched on and it was a big thing. Well, it all, like you said, everything came together all at once. And I was a person that was interviewed and did a bunch of interviews about it. Was also early in the Dunning-Kruger curve, where I live, I think, most of my life. That first little hey, I think I know something. Then nope, don't at all. So I had a couple of articles where I was quoted in the larger context of a conversation, and it came out, and I was just terrified. I was mortified. I was just, oh my gosh. I even published an op-ed in our local newspaper being like, I'm not saying that people don't need opioids. I'm just saying that we have a whole bunch of tools and we only seem to want to use one of them in many cases. And that may be absolutely necessary, but if we use all of them, we may even be able to get better pain control. I'm not saying we need to sacrifice pain control. I'm saying we could even do better than we are if we just look at prescribing more than one medication for a patient. And it went sideways. And I got like death threats on my Twitter account, and I like deleted my Twitter account and all this other stuff. And what it brought to my, after I got over like the immediate, just like more, I was so personally hurt by this. Like it was for people that have no idea who I am or anything like that. I took it so intensely personal because that's just how I've been wired since I was a kid.
You're also young. You're young. I mean, you're young. Like this stuff, it's hard when you're young on social media to be attacked. I feel bad for people.
Yeah, and so once I got through it, it kind of did that. And so when I saw your article, it made me take pause, and you'll be happy to know that even it made me change some of the things I was doing. Not necessarily, and again, I was not going after this going like, ooh, I get like, more RVUs if I do this or this, or, you know what I'm saying? That wasn't, I was just sitting there going like, well, I think tension is probably one of the reasons why these hernias are failing. And maybe if we do things to relieve that tension, and maybe I was putting too much tension on my previous closures. And like you said, it's like my practice at the time was not set up to track these patients. And the EMR was even worse and harder to find these people after the fact. And I was in the standard kind of, I'll see you at 2 weeks and then maybe again at 6 weeks, and then let me know if there's a problem. And I meant that, but nobody comes back very rarely. If there's a problem, they go to someone else, or they are at a different place in their life geographically. And so all that kind of can hit me in a way that I was like, oh my gosh. And then I'm reading the example surgeon who's, just from up the road from me. And I was just sitting there going, oh, that could have been me. I'm sure there's a patient that, could have been that. So, it's just kind of funny how things will hit you. But many times the way people perceive things is through the lens of their own biases and through the lens of their own experience. And I live in a constant state of imposter syndrome. And I wish I could say that it's not like just in my professional life. It's just part of my like thread of my being, and I have a lot of work to do on that. Like I have imposter syndrome in my own marriage. I've been married for almost 20 years. I've been with my wife since we were 17, and I'm still just like waiting on the day that she like wakes up and like recovers from her head injury and goes like, oh wait, I could do way better than this joker over here. So, but I think that's just, it's an interesting way. So I did wanted to kind of talk to you, and I'm glad you were willing to talk about it, just about the fact that I had suspicion that the article was not necessarily representative of everything that you believe in its totality, but is definitely through the lens of, and an article that articles that present a kind of a very fair picture of the situation. They don't get a whole lot of read.
So a lot of people complained about that, and that's a fair critique. Is it's not balanced, right? Like we didn't talk about all the good, and I think that is something that is a surgical community, especially as surgical leaders and leaders in surgical societies, because of how common hernia surgery is, should think about that argument carefully, because number one. As you said, the New York Times, which I'm not a big fan of that newspaper for the record, but they're not there to provide balance. That is obvious. This is an investigative thing from the New York Times. They don't fake it like they're trying to provide balance. But I think that what we should do as surgeons, right? And it's a lot of the conversation that we had earlier, which is the harm that we can create and the lasting effect on patients and us. Is I think we should be very careful to argue the balance argument, because regardless of the balance, how much balance must there be to justify doing aggressive, inappropriate procedures on patients potentially causing harm? I don't think there is enough balance for that. So I think that the balance argument I don't really agree with per se. And like, this is what I was going to say, but I remember now. I really, to be honest, the one thing I did not like about the article was the CPT code billing stuff. I recognize that there's a lot of promotion of inappropriate billing and whatnot, but in my heart of hearts, I truly believe that most surgeons are not sitting next to the patient or at the console, wherever, thinking that if I actually cut this muscle, I'm going to get paid more money. I really don't believe. I'm sure that there are a few people that do, but I think that is the vast, vast, vast minority. Now, there might be people that are kind of like describing what they didn't do to get that. That's a different story. But I'm talking about the actual, what is driving people to cut muscles that might cause people harm. And I don't think it's financial. I really do not. To me, that's what that article is. It's like, what is driving people? It is the combination of some surgical people who are out there promoting this stuff, combined with an industry leader that is extremely powerful in this world right now. And to me, that was the spotlight. And I think that's in the background of the ability on social media to put up videos and kind of see things very, very quickly. That was the kind of milieu, the billing and like stuff. That was less relevant to me. I think it's an issue I get it. There's like this 4 codes and all this craziness. But to me, I think it was more about like just trying to get into what is influencing us as surgeons. And, what can we do if we step back and say, can we provide balance, right? If you're a leader at the American College of Surgeons, American Hernia Society, SAGES, whatever, right? When you have a lecture about minimally invasive hernia surgery, having balance of, and I'm not talking about balance of conflict. I could care less about the conflict. I'm talking about balance of approaches. Because, if you stop talking about robotic eye palms or a lap, whatever, eye palm, right? If you just, that becomes like, we're not talking about that anymore.
Yeah.
That drives behavior.
Yes,
and we can control that. Like if you just look at right now, like, even on like CNN now, they provide conservative balance on some of the things with liberal thought, just trying to get the conversation. So I think there's a lot that we could do as leaders to give people the whole picture, right? So there were people sitting in the audience, people there. Because as soon as you take away that stuff and you silently remove it and you stop hearing about it, if you are a practicing surgeon trying to do the right thing, you are naturally going to drift to where they're leading you. And I think that we could do a better job providing the whole spectrum of folks what to do instead of kind of naturally flowing with the tides of what's hot today without knowing the consequences of these things. And like everything in life, right? Like we have learned the consequences the hard way. Like we should acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Posterior sheath breakdowns. We've learned that the hard way. Linear seminaris injuries. We've learned that the hard way. Denervating the abdominal wall. We've learned that the hard way. Like we got to have a way to be safer in how we do it. And I put that to the young people. Like I certainly was not successful in coming up with a way to have the safe introduction of knowledge and ideas and techniques. I think that's what the next generation should do. Stop focusing on the technique. It'll change. Focus on the process of how do we tell the surgeon who's just out there trying to operate, do a good job, and get home to their family for dinner. Like, how do we tell them what to do in a way that hurts the least amount of patients possible? And I don't think we figured that out.
No, I don't. It's an interesting thing because there's also a little bit of an access issue when it comes to patient care. And so people will show up. I mean, I grew up in the very tip of the Oklahoma Panhandle. So sometimes the difference between a person getting a hernia repair or just never getting it repaired is whether that surgeon offers a repair that can fix it. And, you're talking about surgeons that may be, in their 50s. That's not a surgeon that's going to go back to a fellowship. I mean, they're going to go to a training course or a cadaver course, but that's like 2 days. Teleproctoring has made it much easier, but the idea that person, especially if they don't have like the newest teleproctoring equipment, maybe they're still working with an XI or something that doesn't have the ability, getting them or their hospital or somebody going to get them a person to come in and like proctor them for a series of those types of cases. Right. The reality is it's just not feasible, even in a person that wants it. It's hard. And so there's an access issue. And I think the other thing that we don't really have a good grip on is how do you implement these techniques to people such as myself. I didn't do a fellowship. I went out. I did not plan on being a hernia surgeon. That was just what showed up in my clinic. And so over the course of time, my interest in hernia surgery rose because I was just going, I've got a whole bunch of patients coming to see me for this. I really don't want to hurt somebody. Let me see what I can do. And patients are coming in, and then all of a sudden more and more. And so then I started expanding my techniques. I went to the courses and all that kind of stuff. But as you said, most of them are by industry, right? And so in many cases. And so you go through the process of trying to learn. I think the biggest question is like, what do you do for those people that have that there are some patients that just aren't going to have access? Like in a perfect world, everybody would be conglomerated up to, Northwestern or wherever it might be.
No, I think really that's huge. So this is, I think that's a really important thing. And I think that, first of all, the fact that industry controls the majority of our education, I don't think it's a terrible thing. I don't think that's like a deal breaker. Again, I think it's just like always one of those things. Just be a thoughtful consumer of that knowledge, so that, you know, when you go to a course this is put on by a mesh company teaching about how to do hernia surgery, I can assure you, you will see their mesh going in. And that is going to have an effect on you. That's why they're paying for you to be there. And that's okay. That's the kind of win-win that you know, I always say, okay, if I want to put a course on and teach you how to operate the way Mike Rosen operates, it's going to cost you 10, 15 grand. If you do it with industry, it's free. They'll fly you out here. So it's just a simple financial decision for people. And I get it. And so we shouldn't like say that industry cannot be involved in education. They absolutely should be, and they can be. But we, as the consumers and the people who are ultimately operating our patients, just acknowledge the conflict and then manage it and say, you know. And so this is actually, to me, this is one of my fundamentals. And I think I'm going to speak for Intuitive, but watching them over the last 10 years, I believe that they would agree with what I said. What I'm about to say is that I think that maybe their biggest regret, and I truly understand where it came from, is that when they introduced robotic hernia surgery, there was a huge push. And we don't need a $2 million thing to do hernias. This is stupid. We don't need a robot. It's a waste of money. So the natural response to that, which this is why I think the regrettable move, and this is what unfortunately is going to be hard to undo, is let's make hernia surgery more complicated, minimally invasive than perhaps it needs to be, so that we're going to promote things that you could not do laparoscopically that would have required being done open. And so we're going to drive the field to doing more advanced surgeries robotically that cannot be done laparoscopically. And I think that kind of business model made sense for Intuitive at the time. It also created a very interesting platform. And again, this is like being a thoughtful consumer. Is like, let me just give you like a perfect example. It's hard for surgeons, most people, to get up and like just openly promote a device, a robot or whatnot. Like, it's awkward as a surgeon. You kind of lose your credibility if you get up and say, you've got to use the robot. This is the robot, blah, 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 blah. Like, I get that. Most people don't like to do that. Some people can, but whatever. Most people do not like that. So if you can change the conversation to, you're no longer promoting the robot, you're promoting a technique, an approach. Now, we love to talk about techniques.
Correct. Yeah.
And we love to talk about approaches. And we love to show videos, especially videos that I can cut up and make myself look spectacular.
Yes.
So if all we have to do is talk about ETAP or RTAP, these are things that cannot be reproduced laparoscopically, or robotic TARs, right? Like, there are people who have done them laparoscopically, but that's never going to happen. So if you can go out and promote a technique that requires the robot, then we don't have to talk about the robot anymore. We can just talk about the technique, and things will naturally drift to the robot. And so I get where all that came from. I don't think that's from a bad place. I get why people thought that. But like, I think that if we could rewrite the ship, what I would say is, just because you can do these advanced things on the console, just ask yourself, back up like one step in the algorithm and say, is it the right operation for this patient?
Yeah.
Or maybe something smaller. And this is where I'm getting to with your point of like, the person in Oklahoma who isn't robotic advanced they're a general surgeon. They're doing everything, and hernia is part of their practice. We should be promoting to that person the least complex, most reproducible case to just take good care of their community. Because when I used to put on this course in Colorado for when I was in the clinic we would get about 250 critical access general surgeons. And I mean, like, I absolutely love those people, because these were surgeons that had no angle, they would often say, and I love this, like, I wish I had this in my life, they are taking care of their community. And they just want to know what to do, what's right. And if it was hard, they would do whatever it took. But if there was a way to do it like without hurting people as much, they were into it. And they were just like, they were like, to me, they're those people in the middle, right? In our world.
Yeah.
They're the good people. They're the people who just they don't have an angle. They don't care about the RVUs. They don't care about the billing. They don't care about this. If it has to be done robotically this way, they'll do it. If it doesn't, they'll do it. And so they were just truth seekers. And I always like, it's my favorite meeting because it's just like, no angles, no BS, just good general surgeons trying to do it. So to your point, I always say, like, look, the average person out there, like, sometimes the right answer for them is primary closure. Sometimes the right answer for them is an IPOM. It can be done robotically. It's beautiful. You can sew the defect closed, you sew the mess up, or you tack the mess, whatever you want to do. Like, so when we get up and we make it all, mess has to be outside the peritoneal cavity, leave no trace. Like, I think we often forget the consequences of those people, and we leave them behind, and we make them feel like they're doing an inferior job, and we make them feel like they're not taking good care of their patients, and we start to push them to do things that are just unproven yet. If you prove to me that getting the mess outside the peritoneal cavity is better, then okay, we need to teach people to do it. But except, like, right now, we don't have that answer.
Right.
And when we talk about balance, right, like, everybody wants balance, but sometimes they don't. Like, if I even give you that there's some theoretical advantage getting mess outside the peritoneal cavity, I will even throw you that bone, although I don't believe it to be true, but I'll throw you that bone. What about all the risks of trying to create the extraperitoneal place?
Yeah.
Interstitial hernias, bleeding, nerve damage. So that's the balance, right? And we don't know what that is yet. We just don't know. And we certainly don't know it for the rank and file general surgeon who is not a hernia expert and is just has to be able to do hernias. And you can't take hernias away from these people. And you just tell these folks what to do. And I think that's where our messaging, we should all just take a moment and rethink what we're doing. And I think most people, as they get older, I have certainly, will have that moment where they're like, ooh, what am I really promoting here? Like, is this really right for everybody? And so I think if we could just get there quicker, hurt less people along the way, or just acknowledge the uncertainty, that would be the perfect future state.
My rates of ETIPs have been dramatically declining over the past 2 years. My rates of IPOMs have gone up.
Right. Well, it's funny. Like, when you're like my age, I looked at ETIP in the first 5 minutes, and I was like, wow, that is beautiful and cool and incredibly elegant. And when I watch some of these advanced robotic guys do it, I think they make it look fantastic. But I have done thousands of retromuscular surgery cases, and I know what can go wrong.
Yep.
And I immediately was like, this is a lot of surgery for small defects. And once you mess around in that retromuscular space, you're kind of stuck. Now you have a posterior sheath. Now you have to end it somewhere. All these things that I struggle with for 20 years doing open retromuscular surgery, when you apply that to like a 2 centimeter defect, it kind of like sounds cool. But like, people had to get there. And if you got there, you got there. And like, that is, to me, that's actually the confidence builder that you should have, is that you were able to do it. You saw it. You introspected, and you're like, okay, what am I doing here? And I bet you it wasn't easy, because the world is pushing against that right there.
It is, yeah.
But the world in 5 years from now will be like, I can't believe we ever even did these things. Like, it's and that is like, when you're in the middle of your first pendulum swing, you feel like the world is so unsteady and everything. But when you've seen it swing back and forth 5 times, you're just like, okay, like, let it swing, let it. Actually, there's a saying that I think he might be dead now. Bob Beer, he was one of my first mentors. I was a medical student. He was chief of colorectal surgery at USC. And this was in 1994, maybe, or something like that, right when laparoscopic colectomies were taking off. And he told me something. I'll never forget this. He said, when new things come out, Mike, you don't have to be the first person that runs around saying, do it, do it, do it. you also don't want to be the last person saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So the way to really make a career, and this is what I try to do, is sit back and watch these things. Mm-hmm. And when you see something that might be sticking, be the one who studies it. Be the one who brings the knowledge and the data, and then figure it out. And not that every study is perfect, every study is definitive, but I think that, that's why it's okay to wait and watch. And be like, let me give this ETIP thing a couple of years, let's see what these guys talk about. And most people, I think like robotic TARs is the same thing, right? Like, God, it's elegant. Like when I watch it, like I don't even think Alfie does it anymore, right? Like it's beautiful. But I mean, like it takes like 5-6 hours for an operation that would take 1 or 2. Like, is it really 1 day difference on length of stay? Is it really worth it? Like when you're actually getting paid for what you do every day and you got to get home and see your family, like these things swing back. And it's like, okay, of course it has its indications. Yeah. It's great that you know how to do it. But like at the end of the day, for small things, you probably don't need it.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem that you get into, in my experience with ETAPs, right? So then you talk about the pendulum and it's like, well, everybody close the posterior sheath. Don't just reestablish the visceral sac. And then, so then you're in this kind of like, the average surgeon's going like, what am I supposed to do here? You're like, and then you sit there and go, okay, well, I got to get this closed. Well, the posterior sheath won't come together now. So now I'm doing a myofascial advancement flap to get a posterior sheath together. And then you go, well, that seems like a lot for what I was just trying to fix in something much, and you get into those moments. And then I think that's when they take a step back and go, was that like, where did that end up? And you sit there.
So that, you said it so well, and I want to like just kind of reinforce what you just said, which is that is the problem with the retromuscular space. Mm-hmm. And when the next new thing comes out, which I know that it will, always remember, if it starts to change and violate basic surgical principles so that you can accomplish doing it that way, that is when you should, as a surgeon, take a pause and be like, we've always closed the posterior sheath. It's hard to close the posterior sheath for small defects, so now you don't need to do it. When I heard that discussion, to be honest with you, I didn't even anticipate the bulging thing, because truthfully, like I've never not closed posterior sheath, so I never really realized that would be a future thing. But hats off to, I think it was Jorge Diaz who was kind of the first one that kind of sounded the alarm for this. Mm-hmm. I think that, those are the hard lessons that we learn. But I think that is when you mess around in the retromuscular space, and that's what I want always people to realize is we're doing TARs, not for the anterior sheath, it's for the posterior sheath. And so it's to take the tension off the posterior sheath, right? Mm-hmm. That's what the transverse abdominal, and that is the whole problem when you do an ETAP for a 3-centimeter hernia, is all of a sudden you're stuck. You're like, uh-oh, I'm in this space. I can't close it. So you need to do the TAR. It's the right thing to do the TAR, because you got to get the posterior sheath back together without tension. You're going to get these hernias. Same thing for diastases. But that's when as you get older and you think about it, you're like, well, wait a second. Like, if you're already 5 steps down the wrong path, does it really matter whether you take a right or left? You really ought to back up and be like, should I have ever been on this retromuscular path? And like, I think that is kind of the story. And like, retromuscular surgery, I mean, God, it has its place. Like, it's what I do every day. Mm-hmm. I'm not against it. I'm as pro. I mean, honestly, I think I might do more TARs than anybody on the planet. So like, this is not me being against the operation. It's just knowing kind of appropriate usage of it.
It's indication, and which is, nothing, as we go down this path and listen, one of the things about this podcast that makes me very uncomfortable, and I think this goes to your idea about social media and stuff, is that people, somehow some folks have this mistake that I'm like, listen, I'm just talking to people. That doesn't mean I'm an expert at an ETAP, or I've given lectures on how to do like the basics of it. But every time I talk about stuff, I'm just like, listen, this is, you keep in mind who I am, right? And so you got to keep in mind, like there's a weird conflation of people, the loudest speaker or the people that have the most exposure, assuming that they're like the best surgeons. And I'm a big proponent of the majority of the best surgeons in this country. Not one person knows their name outside of 50 miles from where they live. Those people that showed up.
First of all, depending on how you define the best surgeon, to me, the best surgeon usually is the surgeon that takes the best care of their patients.
Yeah.
And those people are rarely on the podium. They're rarely writing papers. It's a different skill set. And a lot of the people on the podium, a lot of the people writing the papers, a lot of the people in leadership positions, these are just facts. It's not critical. They're assumed to be great at some of these things, and they're not all. And that's not bad. They might have great other skill sets of leadership, programmatic development, all that type of stuff. But to me, and this is one of the things that Quality Collaborative has taught me, some of the best people are the people just out in the battlefield fighting, trying to do a good job. And they have the most technical knowledge, and they are the people that do everything every day, like you were just saying, right? And they look at it and they're like, I'm sitting by myself at home after this complication. I'm like, why did I even do this?
Oh, it's
and
brutal.
To me, that is the path to becoming. And I always say it, right? Like the reality is, life is a bell curve. Your job is to be the best surgeon that you can be, provide the best care that you can, and shift yourself as far to the right on the curve as you possibly can. And that is what the best surgeon is. And you'll be influenced along the way by different things, and that's okay. But keep your focus on that, and then just look at yourself and be like, hey, look, maybe these guys get these great results with E-tests, but like, I just don't. It's not my thing. Like, it's funny. Like, I don't like doing reef stopus for small hernias because the truth is, I've learned in my life, I end up like doing a TAR because I can't get the posterior sheath closed, and I feel like, oh my God, I just did a TAR for like a 4-centimeter hernia. That seems ridiculous.
Yep.
Like, it's embarrassing. But I will only close posterior sheath without tension because I'm afraid of interstitial hernia. I'd rather deal with the morbidity of a TAR than deal with the interstitial hernia disaster. So that to me, that's why like I am as advanced in retromescal surgery as you can get, but I just stay away from it for small things because I know my mindset will be you're getting a TAR because I will not accept tension.
And you can make the argument about like the approach and the intuitive thought process and how the retromuscular stuff kind of grew in popularity. One thing that I think that influences folks like me was the fear because I spend so much of my time talking to patients about the plaintiff's attorney commercials around mesh, right? And so there's a fear of intra-abdominal mesh placement. Whether it is justified in the literature or not, there's a fear of it. And so I think a lot of the allure of what turns out to be much more complex surgery than may be needed was alleviating that fear. And it's not, having a new toy to play with, getting your reps in. People don't talk about it enough. There's a little bit of a level of people, you can't go, if you're going to start doing a TAR and you have gone through the training and stuff, your first one shouldn't be a 15-centimeter TAR, right? You have to get a few that are a little less. And I'm not saying that it's just knowing when to stop,
Well, I think it's being able to step back. So let me tell you. So again, I see this happening. Again, it's just the next phase, right? So the concept of mesh causing harm is like it's really important concept to discuss. Because I get that question a lot too. And I would just say that a few things I would say is, number one, the way I typically address this question is to say, look, there's 3 things involved in almost every hernia operation. There's a patient, there's a surgeon, and there's a mesh. Okay? And when things go wrong, there's only one thing that can't speak up for themselves. It's the mesh. And so the mesh almost always gets the blame.
Yeah.
But the reality is it's almost never the mesh. It's patient factors, obesity, smoking, diabetes, whatever. It's surgeon factors, technical issues. It's very rarely the mesh itself. Like there's a couple meshes that we probably should have not used, right? There's the Kugel mesh with the ring in it. That was a bad idea. There's the composites mesh with the heavyweight polypropylene and Gore-Tex. And we've learned that's the bad idea. But like a lot of these other meshes, like when things go wrong, it's almost never the mesh. It's almost always technical. And so it is interesting though. So, and again, I would just encourage everybody, this is not, I just want to be clear, it's not being critical. Industry is meant to follow the trends and make money. But the story that you just brought up about get the mesh outside the peritoneal cavity, intraperitoneal mesh might cause problems. That's actually the same story that is being told right now with absorbable synthetic mesh. It's the exact same story. How long do we need this mesh? You don't need it in you forever. Avoid permanent things. So now things are shifting to, we don't need a permanent piece of mesh. Now, when you look at the long-term data, it's not very encouraging. Well, I take it back. There's a price to pay for not having mesh, right? So if you look at, to my knowledge, kind of the best paper out there right now, the 5-year data is Scott Roth's. And if you look at his data, and depending on how you kind of do the numerator and denominator, which is always controversial, if you take the most optimistic view, it's probably about 20%-ish 5-year radiographic recurrence. If you compare that to, say, my experience with radiographic recurrence rate in TARS, okay, with synthetic mesh, that's about maybe a 4 or 5% recurrence rate radiographically. Now, they'll often compare it to bulge, which is, to me, not really accurate. So if you don't use mesh, if you don't use permanent mesh, the way it should be described to patients is you will have a 5 times higher chance of recurrence. So to me, when we talk about like shared decision making, right? Some patients might be like, well, I'll accept that risk because I don't want to have a permanent synthetic mesh. And say, okay, fair enough. Then you're the one. But it can't be described as equivalent or non-inferior. It actually is worse. Same thing. I think if we talk, you had a discussion with patients. You could say, if I put this synthetic mesh with my technique inside the peritoneal cavity, when you look at like the real long-term data, not uncoated polypropylene mesh and not composites mesh, long-term direct mesh-related complications, it's probably less than 2%, right? Like it's about what it is. So that's what your risk is versus what is the risk of an interstitial hernia, hematoma, nerve injuries, a huge bulge from not closing your posterior sheath. Like people might be like, you know what? I'll take the 2%.
Sure.
So I think, you just have to be careful how you present it, because I think that the hardest part in surgery is to realize that neither of the ways are harmless. They all have their limitations, but we like to simplify things in our mind. And the story of leave no mesh behind is a great story. But, I always said, like, I wrote some article, I can't remember what it is, but it was about like the Yeti effect, which is that like, just because you can't see the abominable snowman does not mean he cannot cause you harm. So it's just kind of understanding all the risks of what we do, and just be okay with the uncertainty. We don't know the answer.
I have, I don't want to take all your time. I could have this conversation for the whole day. I have one quick question, and then I want to hear your hernia hot take. The quick question I have, which may not be that fast, was, with the database, all the information you're getting, the 80% in the middle, many of those folks that are doing, if you take the volume of the 80% are doing out of the overall versus the people that are publishing, things like that 80% volume far outnumbers the rates of the patients, right? In the grand scope of how many hernias are being fixed. 100%. The majority of those folks aren't necessarily in a position to submit, right? Maybe it's just for all the reasons. Not suggesting that they don't care. I don't think that's the 100%. Case. Yep. Do you think that skews the data and the information we're able to glean from the data for the average surgeon with that patient population and that surgeon population missing?
Yeah. So essentially saying, is the QC generalizable, right? And so the answer to that question is, we don't really know the answer to that because we don't know the data of those 80% of people, right? So I can only speculate and kind of measure it against like what else is available there. And I think that is, it's a limitation of every database. It might be a limitation of this database. I don't know if it is or isn't. I would just say that if you look at like NISQIP, which would be kind of a good database to consider in that. That for sure doesn't represent the real world because you have to pay whatever, $125,000 for an abstractor. That's mostly just academic centers. It's very expensive, and I think not enough people. If if you compare to the other thing, which is like individual centers having their Excel and whatnot, definitely those folks are not generalizable because they're just the experts. And again, they provide value.
Yes.
And there's value in that data and understanding what the data would be and what the results would be in an expert's hands. I would say for us, I think I feel confident that we probably approach it just because the numbers are, it's about 56% self-reflect as academic and 46% reflect as community or academic affiliated. So we're about half and half. I don't, the question is, do the community surgeons reflect reality or not? We have some people, I'll mention we have Todd Harris, who is a surgeon in Orange County, California, who literally does lap inguinals in an outpatient surgery center every day by himself. He's a solo practice guy. We have another one, Mickey Reinhorn, who works out in Boston, who does both shoulditis and preperitoneal inguinal hernias open and some laparoscopy with his partner, Nora Fullington. It's just the two of them. They're solo. They work out of an ambulatory surgery center. They're just really committed to this process. So I think we have that. So I think we get closer. Now, they're probably experts and they're hernia-focused people. In the ideal world, if we could get everybody, that would be it. It is funny, though. I got to tell you, with like clinical trials and research and everything, and the QC is like a perfect example, right? I get this all the time with myself. Like when I write a paper, like let's say my biologic for synthetic that showed that that synthetic worked better than biologic. So there was the argument that it's this expertise argument that, well, if you're a biologic mess company, how do you sell against that article? You say, well, you're not Mike Rosen. Mike Rosen's done 3,000 of these. Are you sure you can get his results? Because if you can't get his results, you might not want to use synthetic mesh. So that's, right. I'm too good of a surgeon to believe my results. And sometimes that's an argument to QC. It's a bunch of experts. It doesn't result. But then when I publish a paper about robotic surgery and the outcomes are not better than laparoscopy and they're not better than open, then the argument is Mike Rosen sucks. And Mike Rosen's a terrible surgeon, and Mike Rosen can't operate. So that's the other expertise argument, is that you're not good enough. So that argument often happens with the QC too, which is that we get kind of branded as like, it's a bunch of open people who suck, can't do robotics, or it's a bunch of, So I think I think those are great arguments to have, and I don't like shy away from that. I'll lean into that and say that, yeah, there might be some uncertainty. I would definitely say, personally, I think a paper from the QC would be more valuable to the rank and file surgeon than a paper written by just my own experience. Because it's just, I do different things and I'm like hyper-focused. But I guess that's the other thing, like when I do a robotic thing, and I'm not the world's greatest robotic surgeon, that might be more generalizable for the rank and file person with the results that I get. So it's a funny argument that you can have a million different ways. And it gets back to, and this is like our whole political world that we live in right now, that there's just some magical right and wrong answer.
Right.
And the truth of the matter is it's gray.
Absolutely.
And it's sometimes the QC probably does represent the real world, and sometimes we might not represent the real world. And both of those things can exist, and you as the surgeon can digest that individually and think about it. And I think I always say, like, use it as a part of your decision-making process. And just like how it shouldn't sway you into doing yes or no, neither should somebody who's getting up on the podium giving you the most elegant talk, who's an incredible public speaker, they shouldn't make you do something either. It should just be all the bits and pieces of information that you take in, and then you go home and you try it, and you're like, Like, I did some robotic TARs after Alfie taught me, and I did like maybe 5 or 10 of them or something, and I kind of was like, just personally, I was like, you know what? These are people that don't need TARs. This is too much surgery. It's taking too long. I do this fine open. I don't really think I'm getting any better. So I got off of it. I'm not anti-robotic TAR. Just me personally, I was like, this doesn't provide value for me and my patients. I don't criticize people who do it. I think young people should learn how to do it. But I think that's kind of the take in all the bits and pieces, try stuff, and then it's okay if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. Very, very, very much appreciate you coming on. I would love to hear if you have any hernia hot take for us.
My hernia hot take is for all young people out there fixing hernias right now. Take a deep breath. At the end of the day, we are not doing life and death surgery. We are quality of life surgeons. And that actually is why I chose this field. And it's what I love most about this. To be able to give people's quality of life back is one of the greatest skills to have. And I always tell people, like there's no chemotherapy, there's no radiation for what I do. I got to do the right thing for patients. It's up to me as a surgeon. But just remember, it's just hernia surgery. And we don't have to make it more complicated than it needs to be. And so when you're young, you're trying to get out there, you're trying to come up with innovative things, you're trying to come up with the next acronym, which I do hate. You're trying to do whatever. Just don't lose sight of your long-term career will be based on helping patients and keeping them first. And so it's easy in today's world to get caught up in some of this stuff. But for the longevity of your career, and quite frankly, for your family, your patients, your mental health, just keep patients first. If you can do that, then to me, that's the first step amongst many steps to having a long, healthy, happy career. And that's all I got. And keep innovating, keep pushing it. And it's an awesome field.
Well, I'm very, very honored to have you on. Appreciate you taking your time. I know it's a valuable commodity. But this will wrap up our episode of the Hernia Gods podcast. And just, again, want to thank Mike Rosen for coming on and sharing his experience with us.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. I hope you got something out of it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. All right. See you next time.